Hey there, booze buddies. Welcome to another episode of Paranormal Spirits, where we share a drink, we tell you a spooky story, and then we rip it apart because booze always shows the truth. Today, I'm going to tell you the story of the exorcism of Roland Edwin Hunkler, supposedly the inspiration for The Exorcist. On June 1st, 1935, Roland was born in Maryland to a German Lutheran family. He was an only child, and he spent a lot of time with one of his aunts, his Aunt Tilly, who was like the cool aunt, right? He hung out with her a lot. She was a spiritualist, so she was into all that jazz, all the stuff that we know and love, and she introduced him to the Ouija board. And they spent hours playing with it. So Tilly passed away at some point, and the family started to kind of experience some strange occurrences. They would hear scratching noises and the sound of dripping water from one of the bedroom walls, which maybe it was a leak, maybe it wasn't. But objects would also fly across the room, and Roland experienced his bed moving while he was asleep.
I love it when people make that claim, because how do they know it's moving if they're asleep?
Well, maybe you wake up and your bed's in a different place.
You mean like whole movement across the room? I'm thinking like moving, right? Like shaking.
Like, I don't know. He just had one of those motel beds that was
like magic fingers bed.
It's a ghost. Aunt Tilly? Is that you?
Tickling Tilly. It's a horrible name.
Tickling Tilly would go to jail now.
Yeah. Tickling Tilly would be like a stripper.
It's a great name. Tickling Tilly. So Roland was described as like a not so pleasant child anyways. And he was kind of a little brat. He was an only child. So he would, standard only child syndrome, I guess. But after all of this, he started to experience like personality shifts. He would randomly burst into laughter, which I do that. Maybe I'm possessed. And he actually started speaking in Latin when he didn't know Latin or speak Latin. Well, maybe not. They said he didn't know it, but I mean, you could find some phrases in Latin pretty quickly. He was no longer able to like hold down food. He wasn't hungry anymore. He didn't want to eat. His appearance changed completely, probably because he wasn't eating. And it says that his loved ones like barely recognized him anymore. And after a while, they stated that his voice didn't even sound like his voice anymore. So he started to like sound more raspy and guttural, and like something that wasn't necessarily human was like using him to speak. Maybe he just went through puberty.
It's possible, but it also reminds me of, remember Annalise Michelle that we talked about too? Like she sort of had that same kind of progression of events.
Because they're like, his voice used to be so sweet, and then it got deep and guttural. And I was like, he's a teenager, so maybe he was a demon. Maybe it was puberty. Everyone that lived in that house said entering his room felt like a freezer. The house was heated, the room was heated, but that room always felt at least 20 degrees colder than the rest of the house. Maybe they had a heating problem. They needed an HVAC guy. Not a priest, just an HVAC guy. All of this stuff was like too much, so the family was like, it's time to get help. So they turned to their Lutheran pastor, whose name was Luther Miles Schultz.
I love that.
Good old Luther to save the day. You have it, Rob? Luther. And he had double L's on his shirt because he was like a superhero. And I don't know what makes somebody a Lutheran, so he has some sort of like cape. I don't know anything about it. Luther was long interested in psychology. He arranged for Roland to spend the night at his house with him so he could observe him. Weird.
Yeah.
Yes. Schultz claimed that he witnessed objects and furniture being moved around the house with nobody obviously moving them. And after that, he actually advised the parents to find a Catholic priest.
Oh, well, Luther, why you getting involved if you can't do anything about it?
They asked. The family was like, yo, LL, we need some help. And he was like, let's do a sleepover. Slumber parties always help. And then the shit started flying around, and he was like, oh, hell no. He's like, we need some Catholics up in here. It's hardcore. According to, one of the stories, because there's a few different stories about how this goes, they found a Roman Catholic priest named Edward Hughes, and they took Roland to a hospital. So they took him to Georgetown University Hospital and performed the exorcisms on him at the hospital. During the initial
series of exorcisms at that hospital, legend has it, he slipped from his restraints because he was in restraints, and he was able to take a bed spring out of the mattress, and he cut the priest in his arm, and they had to like call it because obviously we needed medical attention thankfully they were in a hospital. Can you imagine? That's a stealthy move, right?
Can you imagine, like, as the mom, I'd like just be having my head out the doorway like, stat,
We need help.
code bloody, stat,
Does anybody have a band-aid? We need a band-aid.
bring the whole box. It's fine.
Some gauze, maybe? Some garden gauze?
We need godly gauze for the priest, please, thank you. It's pretty crazy, though. To get a spring out of a bed, like, how do you even do that?
This is the 30s. I'm picturing those, like, really thin, like, crap mattresses of...
Isn't the spring still attached to something? Or is it just like a loose spring in that bed?
Let me consult my How to Make a Mattress in 1935 manual that I have. So they never fully completed the ritual. He was still in the hospital. In the days that followed, cryptic messages started to show up on his skin, on his torso. A lot of them didn't really have a lot of meaning. They were just like words, which I think is funny. But occasionally a word would come through that like the family could, piece together or something. And the major one was Louis. And they were from St. Louis originally, and they had moved him from St. Louis. So Ronald's mother took this as a sign that they had to go back to St. Louis.
So she took the Louis that came through on her son's body as a sign from the demon or what have you to, like, we need to be in this particular area, like, geographically.
I mean, it's one of those things where, like, Louis, and they're like, do you know a Louis? I don't know a Louis. Do you know a Louis? We used to live in St. Louis, so maybe that means we gotta go back to St. Louis.
Yeah, but wouldn't one, like, maybe, I mean, this is, like, we're talking about a possession and a demon, so a lot of people would argue there is no logical jump, but maybe the logical thing to think about is the demon telling you that maybe Roland picked up the demon in St. Louis? That's where the demon is from, not necessarily like, you need to go to St. Louis now. Why St. Louis?
I don't know.
Like the demonic capital of the nation? St. Louis?
Missouri. Like, I don't even know where Missouri is on the map.
It's in the Midwest somewhere, right?
Geography with Lynn and Caitlin. I wish that my body told me where to go and what to do like that. And I have to like figure it out on my own. I would just be like, what am I supposed to do now? It's like a magic 8-ball, but it's just your body like telling you. And it's like, eat dinner.
Yeah.
Nice world.
Especially you, the moment you have something like that, you'd be like, but I don't want to eat dinner.
Pushing it back in, you're like, rewrite. Ronald's mom, who took this very clear message that was written on her son's skin in a hospital by a mysterious force, said, let's get out of here and go to St. Louis. She literally was convinced that was the only way to save her son, and the rest of the family agreed, and Roland was like, I don't wanna. So maybe she was right? Like, because he didn't want to go back, everyone else did, so maybe. But I don't get why you would tell her to go there if it was like the place that it was going to be its own demise.
Right. Doesn't make sense. Not adding up.
They get back to St. Louis and they find 2 priests who are willing to help them try and, perform the exorcisms and try and rid Roland of the demon once and for all. Reverend William Bowden and Father Walter H. Halloran. So they both agreed that they would come and see the exorcism through to the end, because the other guy pieced out after he got cut with the freaking spring.
He was like the Catholic B team, so now we need the Catholic A team.
Yeah, we need the A team. We need the dynamic duo of exorcisms. In March of 1949, they started their exorcism. They both witnessed scratches being inflicted on the boy from nowhere. They witnessed the bed rising off the floor and crashing on the ground. And they also witnessed him kind of like being contorted and his face contorted and like all of the similar things that typically happen in cases like this. Both priests noted that during the day he was pretty calm and got a little saucy and spicy at night, right? So it started to get really wacky at night. And they thought, during the day it's gonna be, maybe he's getting better. And then at night it got real bad. So from dusk till dawn, Roland would just scream incoherently, stare off blankly.
Can you imagine all night screaming.
Sounds like my apartment in my early 20s. Just mattress slamming on the ground, screaming all night. Pretty docile during the day. Scratches coming out of nowhere. That was his name. No. He's like, why are there so many other names here? I'm like, get out of my house. Don't worry, it wasn't all screaming. Sometimes he would have like a really raspy whisper, and he would start taunting people with the whisper, which I like. I think a whisper taunt is worse than a yell taunt.
Yeah,
because it's just more annoying.
Yeah. Because a yell taunt just gets like audibly annoying after a while. You're like, enough, Roland, we gotta.
Hey, you little bitch. You're such a little bitch. Do you know that your mom thinks you're a little bitch? I don't know why little bitch is the taunt. And he also, standard would react like really violently to anything religious. And even if when they were praying, if they brought out crosses or crucifix or anything like that, he would react crazily to it. They continued doing this night after night after night, and it happened for a really long time. And things just started to get worse and worse. And among a lot of things that occurred, they said that often the number 10 would like show up on his body again, like coming through his skin, and they were guessing that maybe that's the number of demons or spirits that were inhabiting the body.
Oh, I was thinking maybe they needed to go drive down Route 10 because it had been directional up until here.
They get on Route 10, and then the next one's like, take a left, exit 42, and then it just directions to like a Denny's. I was hungry, little bitch. Hey, little bitch.
That's gotta be my favorite taunt now.
Little bitch. Hey, little bitch. You don't be such a little bitch. Take me to Denny's. I want to moon over my hammock, you little bitch. Don't turn into IHOP, little bitch. I said Denny's. I said exit 42 to Denny's, little bitch. So after 3 weeks of doing this, Ronald eventually, he started cursing the priests while pissing all over them. He was probably saying, take this, little bitch. I sprinkle our time, little bitch. Stuck on this holy water, little bitch. And the priests were like, you know what? We need to take a hard timeout. We need a timeout. So they took Roland to a hospital. So he was like under around the clock care, and he had a feeding tube put in because he wasn't eating anymore. So they needed to feed him through a feeding tube. He stayed there for a little while, and then the day after Easter, the priests like tapped back in. They were ready. They were like, you know what? We had our Easter Sunday. Jesus is risen. We are ready to go. And so in the hospital, with the cooperation of medical staff, they started, to go through the exorcism and do all that again. Shortly after they started, Ronald started having seizures. So he had like severe seizures, so bad that they had to stop because they were scared he wasn't going to survive the seizures. They were that bad.
That's crazy. Again, like another correlation with him and Annalise.
But while he was having these seizures, the priests were like covering him in crucifixes and rosary, and they were just reciting passages and doing everything that they could to try and just get rid of these demons, right? And that's just funny to me. This kid is seizing hard, and they're like trying to balance crucifixes all over him. Like, what?
Right? Maybe just a little Ativan under the tongue might have done the trick. Like,
nah, they just put a crucifix in there. It's fine. Yeah, chew on this. It'll make you not bite your tongue. Several hours later, after a night full of that, it was just tons of that nonsense happening. Roland opened his eyes and kind of just announced that the demons were gone. Yep. He literally woke up and was like, all good here, kids. Thanks for the help. He didn't retain, obviously, like a lot of memories of what was happening to him during that time period, but he did have some sort of like vivid moments. He says he recalls being in a dark place in which he couldn't escape. So he was there forever. And then he said right before he came out, he was offered salvation by a man who identified himself as Saint Michael. So Saint Michael came and saved him.
If I were Michael, right? Like, so Saint Michael, I'm assuming, is the Archangel Michael. I would be like, hey, little bitch.
I'm the Archangel Michael. I wouldn't go with Saint. Michael's the warrior. He's a badass. Hey, little bitch. It's me, Archangel Michael. Here to save you. Come on, little bitch. Let me get you out of here. Stop being such a little bitch. Let's go. Let's get out of here.
That's what I imagine Michael to be more like, honestly.
Yeah, I support that. That's hilarious. Word got out about all of this, and it became kind of a spectacle, and Roland was so overwhelmed by all of it that they didn't release his name at all. They called him Roland Doe. And like, honestly, most of the information that was leaked out didn't come from the family. It came from the priests. So the priests left, and they were like, yo, let me tell you about this little bitch. I'm going to tell you the story about this little bitch. They basically played telephone. Priests were jibber-jabbing about what happened. So there's a lot of speculation, obviously, behind where the demons came from, and most people tend to think that they came from the Ouija board because they never used it correctly. So they think that it was just open the whole time. But he lived a whole life. I think he was like in his 70s. I don't know if he was like dead or really, really old by the time that he released his name to whatever, but once the book came out, The Exorcist, he had to change his name. He wanted to make sure that his identity couldn't be discovered and all that jazz. But yeah, that was his story, was the inspiration behind the book. It's interesting that this was the story, right? That was the inspiration, because it seems very similar to all the others.
Well, maybe this was just like the first big publicized one in the US. I mean, exorcism, it's actually pretty rare. Still obviously controversial. There are going to be people that say it was medical, and like, I'm curious if he ever had any more seizures in his life.
I don't think so. It said he led a pretty normal life after. Aside from a few vivid memories, he didn't really remember any of the stuff that happened to him. So everything was kind of hearsay through either what the priest said or his family, who didn't really talk about it either.
Do we know if they ever found out, like, who the demon or demons were? Any names or anything?
No names that I could find, because it didn't sound like he was communicating a lot with them. Like, he was, like, taunting and doing, like, things like that, but it didn't sound like he was really trying to give information, aside from where he wanted to go, obviously.
Right. Yeah, maybe that was the demon's name. Louis the demon.
Maybe. Oh, Lou. I'm Lou, the demon. I'm here, little bitch. I'm here, freaking. I'm just here.
Three-fingered Lou, you know.
3 fingers.
3 scratches.
I lost. Oh, 3-fingered Lou. 3 scratches. I lost the other 2 in a bed spring incident.
We don't talk about it.
We don't talk about bed springs anymore. Get them out of here. Well, that's the crappy story of Roland Doe and the exorcism that inspired the book The Exorcist. If you like what you saw, you better like, subscribe, and ring that bell, little bitch. You better do it. Don't you like it, little bitch? And if you don't like what you saw, I'm gonna tell you to go somewhere through a message on my skin. Get out. Thanks for watching. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time for more drunken adventures with 2 old little witches. Goodbye. Back it out.